Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm Robin Douglas. I'm a senior lecturer in political theory in the Department of Political Economy. And what I want to do in this talk is to tell you a little bit about the department itself and the vision behind the department. I want to then spend a fair amount of time going through the details of 3 of the 4 programs that we run in the department, which are the 3 up there. And then I'll very swiftly go over some more general things about studying at King's and in London more generally. The first thing to say is that the Department of Political Economy really is a very unique venture. So we're the only department of the kind in the UK. I think there's a couple of others in the world, but this is really a unique enterprise. And the idea behind it is that we're really interested in where politics and economics meet. And we're also interested in the philosophical underpinnings of the political and economic world that we inhabit. One way of thinking about it is to say that we don't think you can understand politics without some understanding of economics, and we don't think you can understand economics without some understanding of politics. Right? When we look around the world we inhabit today, the two often come together. And this is especially true in the kind of post-financial crisis world that we inhabit. It's also a very young department, so it was founded in 2010 and we've grown rapidly in that time in terms of student numbers, in terms of staff and in terms of the programs that we offer. And hopefully that vibrancy and energy comes across both in forums like today, but more importantly when we're teaching students on the program. So there are 4 programs that we run out of the Department of Political Economy: a politics program, a political economy program, and a philosophy, politics and economics program, better known as PPE. They're the 3 I'm going to be talking about today. We also run a BSc in economics, which is co-taught with the business school, and my colleague Colin Jennings is given a couple of talks about that separately because the economics program is quite distinct to these ones. So I want to spend a bit of time just showing you what these programs look like. So I'll start with the politics one. Now it says here these are typical modules. That's not my choice of word, that's the word that I have to use apparently because we can't guarantee that if you were to do this program you'll be doing exactly these modules. But this is what it looks like at the moment, and this is what I would expect it to continue to look like for some time. So the way all our programs work is that in the first year we set everything, so you have to do a number of modules, they're all compulsory, and as you progress through your program you get more freedom to choose the options that best suit your interests. So in your first year you would do a module called World Politics since 1945, and this, much as the title suggests, gives you an introduction to international politics since the end of the Second World War. It looks at some of the major sort of world-defining events in the political arena during that time. It also introduces you to some of the main theories in international relations theory: liberalism, realism, feminism, things like that. Comparing political systems is a module that you do on all 3 of the programs I'm going to be talking about. This is effectively the introduction to the empirical study of political institutions. I think that's a helpful way to think about it. So on that module you might look at, for example, the differences between, say, the Westminster parliamentary model in somewhere like the UK compared with the American presidential system in the United States. You look at how parties operate in different systems. You also look at non-democratic regimes as well. So how do authoritarian regimes function? What are the differences between different types of authoritarian regimes? What are the differences between authoritarian regimes and democracies? What do they share in common as well? The 3rd module listed on there is Introduction to Political Theory. This is the sort of module that I teach. Political theory is where you study the kind of normative and theoretical underpinnings of the political world that we inhabit. So you ask questions like, what do we really mean by liberty or equality or justice? Right? What does it mean to be committed to equality? Are equality and liberty in tension of them? If we in tension with one another? If we really value an egalitarian social order, does that mean restricting people's liberties in certain ways? And if so, which values should prevail? The 4th module listed here, Fundamentals of Political Research. Again, this is common across 2 of the programs. And this is really designed to get you thinking critically about politics. And there's a sense in which all of the modules aim to get you to think critically, but this one helps you to develop the research skills you need throughout your degree. So it helps you to think about how do you go about asking critical questions? How do you go about testing hypotheses? Should we think about politics scientifically, or should we think of it in a more humanistic, artistic way? And the final one, which I'll mention, I think it's important to mention this. This isn't usually people's favourite module, statistics for political science, but all of the programs that we offer have a very strong research methods component. And we think it's really important right from the first year of your program to get you doing some research methods, because we don't want you to just go away and read lots of things and form your opinions about the different things that you read. We want to train you how to be a researcher. When you move into the second year, you can choose whether you want to pursue the BA in politics or the BSc in politics. All students do research methods in politics, which continues to develop some of the research skills I mentioned before. If you want to pursue the BSc option, then you have to take further to that a more advanced statistics module and a game theory module. And then beyond that, the rest of the modules you take in the second year are completely your choice from the many that we offer. And so if you're doing the BA, you effectively get to choose another 7 modules. If you're doing the BSc, you choose another 5. And then when you move into your third year, you have to do a dissertation. A dissertation is an 8,000 to 9,000 word piece of independent written research. So that runs throughout the whole year. You choose the topic, you choose what you want to look at. We allocate you a supervisor based on the topic you've chosen, and you work closely with them. But it's really your opportunity to do an independent piece of research. And then beyond that, you can choose another 6 optional modules. So that's the kind of broad outline of the politics program. So one of the main differences, probably the most important difference with political economy, is rather than doing world politics in the first year, you would do principles of economics. And so principles of economics introduces you really to the study of economics. That's its main purpose. I guess some of the questions you might ask there are things like, why do firms not always set wages at the lowest level? Right? Why do they sometimes pay their workers more than they need to recruit everyone they need? What are the different trade-offs? What are the different ideas at play there? Comparing political systems, introduction to political theory, fundamentals of political research, all the same as the politics program. And then quantitative methods is very similar to the statistics module for politics students, but it has a bit more of an economics focus to it. When you move into your second year, everyone does political economy, approaches, concepts and issues. This is a module that looks at some of the great political economists in the history of thought. So people like Karl Marx, Adam Smith, John Maynard Keynes, more recently people like Thomas Piketty, and you study some of their work and you look at the main ideas to take from their work and how they've shaped the discipline of political economy. So everyone does that. If you want to pursue the BSc in political economy, further to that you take microeconomics, macroeconomics and econometrics, and then that leaves you with either 7 or 4 optional modules depending on whether you're doing the BA or BSc path. And then your third year is much the same as the politics program. So moving on to the PPE program. This is co-taught with the Department of Philosophy. I guess the most important difference about this program is in the first year you have a module entitled Introduction to Philosophy. This is taught in the Department of Philosophy, and it's really broken down into 4 sections. So you have a section on ethics, a section on metaphysics, a section on epistemology, and a section on logic. So if you like, the 4 most important subfields that you really need to have at least a basic grounding on if you're going to study philosophy at a more advanced level. Some of the others are then similar to the political economy program. You don't do introduction to political theory on this program. Instead, you do political and economic philosophy, which is in some ways similar to political theory, but it's co-taught with the Department of Philosophy and it has more of an economics focus. So for example, you might ask questions on that program like, should we have legal markets in organ donations and transfers, right? Should people be freely allowed to sell their organs to whoever they like in other parts of the world? Or should the state step in to prohibit or regulate that? Like, what are the considerations on both sides? And they're ethical considerations, they're economic ones as well. When you move into the second year, as it stands, you have the choice of either going down what's called the bipartite or the tripartite route, which basically means if you do the tripartite, you continue with all of philosophy, politics, and economics. If you do the bipartite, you drop one of those 3. And if you do the bipartite, you have to take 3 modules in your second year in your chosen 2 disciplines, which gives you another 2 modules to choose freely. And if you do a tripartite, you have to do at least 2 from each of the 3 disciplines, and that gives you another 2 to choose freely. You can get a BSc in PPE. To do that, you have to continue with economics, and the BSc requirements are exactly the same as the BSc requirements on the political economy program. So if you want to take micro, macro, and econometrics, then you can get a BSc in PPE. And then when you move into your third year, there's a bipartite and tripartite pathway, so you have to take at least 2 modules from your 2 chosen disciplines for bipartite, which gives you another 4 to play around with. And then for the tripartite, you do at least one module in each discipline, which gives you another 5 to play around with. The dissertation isn't compulsory for the PPE program. You can take it if you choose to do so. That would then count for 2 of the optional modules. I want next to say something about the type of optional modules that we offer. And this is just a very small selection from a vast array. These are some of the ones that I think are most interesting. And this is where I think being in a Department of Political Economy is really an advantage, because we have lots of modules that are really designed to kind of look at the intersection of politics, economics, and philosophy as well. So to give a couple of examples, the political economy of immigration. Obviously, immigration is a really hot topic today. If you think about what's going on the American borders as we speak, if you think about the refugee crisis in Europe at the moment, it doesn't make any sense to think this is either a political problem or an economic problem. There are really important economic questions, right? What will be the impact on European welfare states if they take a lot more refugees? Right? You might think that can largely be analysed as an economic question, right? Think about the amount of tax receipts that the migrants bring, that refugees bring. Think about the cost to bodies like the NHS. So there are really important economic questions, but there are also really important political ones, not just because migration is a political tool that people use for other purposes, but also because lots of the concerns people have about migration are not purely to do with economics, right? They're to do with culture, they're to do with nationality. And if you only study one of these and not the other, then you get a very narrow perspective on it. So immigration is a great example of the reason why we think you need a political economy angle on these types of topics. You just can't understand it from solely a political or an economic perspective. To give another example, ethics, economics, and environmental protection. So this is a module that looks at some of the most important issues in terms of environmental protection today, so things like climate change, and it takes both economic and ethical approaches. So you might look at what different economic models might help to explain how states could reduce their carbon emissions. Right? What looks like it's going to be most effective from that perspective. But you also ask the ethical questions. Whose duty is it to do this? Is it the duty of individual states? Is it the duty of some kind of international organisation? What duties do we have as individuals to facilitate this type of change? Should states that have polluted more historically bear a greater cost of mitigating the effects of climate change? Or should it be based on who has the ability to pay now? Right? These are all questions with a fundamental ethical component to them. And again, we think it's really important that you treat all these together. These are some of our third year options. One of the things I want to emphasize about, especially when you get to the third year, you tend to take modules where there's fewer people on the class and you're being taught by people who are really the cutting edge of research in that field. So, and I'm going to give a couple of examples here. Okay, so on the top of your screen is one of my colleagues, Anya Shortland. And amongst the things Anya Shortland works on is Somalian piracy. So recently she's written reports to the World Bank on their policy towards Somalian piracy. And she has this book coming out sometime in the next year, which looks really exciting. It's called Kidnap. It's about the ransom business. So how does ransom work, right? There are lots of people who are making decisions to get engaged in the ransom business. What are the economics of that? How does it work? How do they govern that where there's not a legal infrastructure in place to resolve disputes? So this promises to be a really exciting book. And she teaches a third year option called The Economics of Crime. So if you were taking that module, then you would be reading her research on Somalian piracy and other people's research. Adam Tebble on the left of your screen, he's a political theorist like myself. A couple of years ago, he wrote a book called Epistemic Liberalism. And this argues for a certain way of trying to resolve disputes of culture and diversity in the world that we inhabit today. So it's a book about the role that the state should take in adjudicating when cultural values come into conflict in modern liberal states. And obviously that's a really pertinent question in the world we inhabit today. He teaches a third year module called Culture, Identity and Justice. And so on that module, you look at questions like, is multiculturalism bad for women? Does promoting the values of certain cultural groups come into conflict with the values of, say, feminists? And again, the point I want to get across here is that when you're taking these modules, you're being taught by people who are doing cutting-edge research in their field. Okay, moving on. Here are just a few examples. If you're thinking about doing the PPE program, here are a few examples of the modules that the Department of Philosophy offers. The Department of Philosophy is one of the biggest philosophy departments in the country, and so it has a vast array of modules. You can obviously do all the standard things, your metaphysics, your logic, your philosophy of language, but they also have some really quite interesting and wide-ranging things. So you can do Indian philosophy, Chinese philosophy, philosophy of race, the philosophy of gender, the philosophy of biology. So there's an awful lot that you could do if you decide to go with PPE. And next, I want to say a little bit about studying in London. One of the reasons why you might be considering coming to King's is because it's right at the heart of London. And I think there are some real advantages to that. Right? You're at the centre, as it says here, of the political and legal world. Right? You've got the Royal Courts of Justice, 2-3 minute walk in one direction. You've got Westminster, a 5-minute tube ride in the other direction. I think there's something nice about being immersed in the object of your study while you're here. And if you want to do internships and things like that, then there are advantages to being in the heart of London. It also means you have access to a great range of libraries. So the main library for these programs is the Morn Library, which is on Chancery Lane, so a 5-minute walk from here, just behind the Royal Courts of Justice. And that's a really impressive building. You also have access to all the other University of London libraries and the British Library, which has a stunning collection of books and other works. I think the experience of studying in London is very, very different to the experience of studying at many other UK universities, probably further afield as well, especially if you compare somewhere like King's College London to a campus-based university in other places of the UK. There are pros and cons of both, but if you are studying at somewhere like King's College London, university doesn't encompass the whole of your life because you're in the middle of London. And so you spend a lot of time interacting with people, seeing people who are not at university at all. Whereas if you go to a campus-based university, it's very easy for the kind of university culture to take over everything. And there are some good things about that and there are some bad things about that. But I think somewhere like King's College London tends to attract a different type of person, in a way, to some of the campus-based universities. And I think it's worth thinking about what you feel more comfortable with and what type of atmosphere you would like to enjoy. You don't have to stay in London though. So you have the option of taking one semester in your second year at another university. And these are the universities where we have agreements so that you can do one semester of study abroad. So Hong Kong, National University of Singapore, and there's a 3-campus program, 3 universities in North America, and Sciences Po as well if you have some French. And so lots of our students take up this opportunity, and it's a wonderful experience just to go somewhere else for a few months, get used to a different way of teaching, a different way of learning, and just a really good excuse to spend a bit of time in another part of the world. Okay, so I want to say something more about the kind of culture of how things work. So as with most universities of this sort, your typical teaching module will be, for most modules, you're typically doing 4 modules in any given semester, and you typically have a lecture and a seminar each week. So a lecture in somewhere like this, where someone like me does most of the talking, and then a seminar in groups of about 15 to 20, where you sit around and discuss the issues. So that's what the kind of main teaching profile looks like. But outside of that, we have a lot else to support you. So every student has a personal tutor who hopefully stays with them the whole way through their program. And that's really the first point of contact for any issues that students might have of an academic nature, of a pastoral nature as well. Throughout term time, all staff have 2 hours of office hours where students can just turn up and drop in and ask any questions they've got, either about studying in general or perhaps about essays they're writing. And so that's a really good opportunity that we encourage students to make use of to make sure that they can talk to us on a one-to-one basis. We're also very fortunate. Over the last few years, we've had some really excellent student representatives. And this has been very important because, as I mentioned earlier, we're a young, growing department, and it's been great to have their feedback throughout the first few years of our life as such. And so every program elects 2 student representatives per year group. So that makes quite a lot overall. So for the politics program, you'd have 2 representatives in the first year, 2 in the second year, 2 in the third year. They're elected by students. The main way we exchange ideas is through a staff-student liaison committee, which meets about twice every semester, and there the students set the agenda. So they tell us what things they want to discuss, they raise issues, problems that they have, they make suggestions for things that could be improved, and tell us about things that we might be doing well that we could do more of, and that has been really invaluable. I think quite uniquely, we also allow our student representatives to sit in on both our education committee meetings and our departmental meetings. And these are the places where we're making decisions about how to change the programs, what modules to offer in the case of education committee, and other important decisions about the future of the department in the case of departmental meetings. There are lots of student societies at King's. There are 4 that I think it's worth mentioning here. 3 of them are closely related to degrees I've talked about, so the Politics Society with the Politics programme, the Economics and Finance Society with the Political Economy programme, and the PPE Society with the PPE programme. Also, as a kind of umbrella one, if you like, the Think Tank Society is also often of interest to our students. These are societies that are completely run by our students, but the department helps in terms of funding and some of the logistics of organising events. They do a vast array of things and are really good to get involved in. One of the things that I want to show you is that these are some of the journals that the societies publish. So Dialogue is published by the Politics Society, Agora by the PPE Society, and Perspectives by the Economics and Finance Society. And these are incredibly impressive. They're very well edited. They look very professional. Students writing them, staff sometimes writing them, other experts writing them. They're completely edited by the student body, members of the society. This is a great thing to get involved in if it suits you, and it's a great thing that, to put on your CV further down the line. But these are incredibly impressive accomplishments by our students. I wanted also to say briefly something about events. We organise a lot of talks. Sometimes these are organised by the societies I've just mentioned. Sometimes they're organised by the department. And here again, it's an advantage being in the heart of London because there are lots of people around, there are lots of people passing through. So these are some of the people we've had over the past couple of years. I won't talk about all of them. So in the top middle, though, is Sharon White. She, at the time, was the most senior female civil servant in the Treasury. Under her, Yanis Varoufakis, who was the Greek finance minister in 2015 at the time of the kind of the Greek bailout debates, and he resigned over that, and he's an incredibly entertaining speaker who likes to tell you lots of asides about the corruption of the IMF and sometimes personal stories about Christine Lagarde. Ed Balls, all know from Strictly Come Dancing. Thank you very much.